61 The Nazareth inscription, the Louvre, Paris, France. This marble tablet was discovered in Nazareth and was acquired in 1878 by Wilhelm Frehner, a German archaeologist, then sent it to Paris. It is now on display at the Louvre, Paris. It is an edict written in Koine Greek from an unnamed Caesar that orders capital punishment for anyone who disturbs tombs and particularly those who move sepulchre-sealing stones. This matches well with the post-resurrection account in the Gospels. What is even more interesting is that it was reportedly found in Nazareth, the hometown of Jesus. Based on epigraphy, it is dated to the first half of the 1st century. As well, we read in the Gospels that at the time of Jesus' death many holy people were raised from the dead and appeared in the city of Jerusalem, Matthew 27 verses 52 to 53. The reports must have come all the way to the Emperor Tiberius. In recourse, there was an official edict from Caesar that no other graves would be disturbed upon penalty of death. It is therefore good evidence of the Gospel account that the story commonly reported among the Jews after the resurrection was that Jesus' disciples stole the body of Jesus while the guards slept. 62 Akeldama, the place where Judas Iscariot committed suicide, south of Silwan, Jerusalem, Israel. The soil in this area is composed of rich clay and was used in the past by potters and thus was also called the potter's field, as in Matthew 27 verse 10. The clay also has a strong red color, thus it was also called the field of blood. This is the place where Judas hanged himself. His body decomposed and fell to the ground, spilling his intestines. It was called field of blood since the blood money, which was used to pay Judas to betray Jesus, was used to buy the field, and it was at this place where Judas' blood spilled on the ground. In 1874 the Orthodox Church built the monastery of St. Onufrius, over the site of several tombs which date from the 1st century, which can be seen inside. According to 16th century tradition, this was also the place where the apostles fled to after Jesus' arrest in Gethsemane. Interestingly, this field is located in the cursed Hinnom Valley, where child sacrifice occurred. God promised that he would bring evil upon this place in Jeremiah 19 verse 3. 63 The place where Jesus met with his disciples after the resurrection, Church of the Primacy of St. Peter, Tabgha, Israel. The Church of the Primacy of St. Peter, built by the Franciscans in 1933 and made of black basalt, is on the site where early Christians believe Jesus said to Peter, "Take care of my sheep," and reinstated him as the foremost of the apostles. This is located in Tabgha, Israel, and is built on 4th century church ruins. In the 9th century this place was called the Place of the Coals to commemorate where Jesus had a fire of coals near this location. Jesus appeared to his disciples here in his resurrected body, and thus the white limestone outcropping has a sign placed by the Franciscans, verse "This is a holy ground." 64 The place of the Ascension of Jesus Christ, Chapel of the Ascension, at Tur, Mount of Olives, Jerusalem, Israel. The prophet Zechariah foretold, "For behold, I am coming and I will dwell in your midst," Zechariah 2 verse 10. The Lord came to be born as a baby on earth. Then the prophet Hosea foretold that verse, "I will return again to my place." Hosea 5 verse 15. The Lord would ascend back to his place. Jesus Christ fulfilled both of these prophecies. For the first 3 centuries of the early persecuted church, the ascension of Jesus was celebrated in a cave part way up the mountain for safety reasons. However, by the late 4th century, Queen Helena had a circular memorial chapel built at the summit of the Mount of Olives over the site where Jesus ascended. In 384 AD, the Spanish pilgrim Lady Egeria reported visiting the Chapel of the Ascension where Jesus ascended to heaven 40 days after his resurrection. Unfortunately, This chapel was destroyed in 614 AD by the Persians. Then it was rebuilt but then destroyed again during the conquest in the 10th century. Then the chapel was again rebuilt by the Crusaders in the 12th century upon the ruins of the Byzantine chapel. This octagonal chapel originally had no roof and was surrounded by pillars. In 1187 AD, Sultan Saladin converted this chapel into a mosque complete with a mihrab, showing the direction of Islamic prayer. Since then, although the land is under Islamic jurisdiction, Christians are permitted to come and worship here. In 1835 the walls were filled in and a domed roof added. Inside the chapel is a rock where tradition holds Jesus left his right footprint in the stone as he ascended into heaven bodily. Christians come and worship their risen and ascended Lord God and Saviour Jesus Christ of Nazareth in this place. 65 The place of the stoning of Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr. Basilica of Saint Stephen, Jerusalem, Israel. Saint Stephen was a Hellenist Jew who had a Greek name which means wreath or crowned. He was a deacon who was chosen to minister to the Greek-speaking Christian widows who were being neglected in the daily distribution of food. He was falsely accused of blasphemy against Moses and the law, and that he said that Jesus of Nazareth would destroy the holy place, the temple, and change the customs that Moses handed down. French archaeologists Louis Hugues Vincent and Félix Marie Abel placed the site of the stoning to be to the north of the city. At this site, the Empress Eudocia built a structure at the site, where she was later buried. The chapel was destroyed by the Persians in 614 AD. Then in 638 AD a small church was built by Saint Sophronius, was enlarged by the Crusaders, but then destroyed. In the 19th century, French Dominicans built this church at the site, which was completed in 1900. The northern gate, now called the Lion's Gate, was called St. Stephen's Gate many years ago, owing to the tradition that St. Stephen was martyred outside the gate. If the place is also Golgotha, where Jesus Christ was crucified, it would make sense that this place was a place of execution versus crucifixion by the Romans and stoning by the Jews. 66 House of Ananias and Straight Street in Damascus, Damascus, Syria. Straight Street is the main street that runs east-west across the city of Damascus, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities. At the end of the street lies the home of Ananias. In 1921, Eustache Delory, a French archaeologist, excavated beneath the home of Ananias in Damascus. He found remains of a Byzantine church from the 5th or 6th centuries. He also found a piece of an altar dedicated to a pagan god from the 2nd or 3rd centuries. In the early 2nd century, the Emperor Hadrian ordered that pagan temples be placed over the main holy Christian sites to keep Christians away from this site and to erase their memory. This is evidence that this was the very place where Ananias was praying, heard God, then brought Saul back to his house to baptize him. Inside the house are 2 rooms with pictures that depict scenes from the life of Saint Paul. 67 The Bab-Kaizen, where Saint Paul escaped by being let down in a basket, Damascus, Syria. Near the home of Ananias is the Bab-Kaizen, one of the 7 ancient city gates in Damascus, built in the Roman era and was dedicated to Saturn. It was near this gate in the city wall where it is believed the newly converted Paul was let down by ropes and basket to escape capture. 68 Street Peter's Cave Church in Antioch, Antakya, Hatay Province, Turkey. The prophet Isaiah foretold verse: "The Gentiles shall see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will name." Isaiah 62 verse 2. The name of the Lord Jesus was becoming known throughout the Roman world and beyond in fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. In Antioch they were called by a new name, now verse Christians. By tradition, This is the site where Paul went to teach and strengthen the disciples for a whole year. It is an ancient cave church, with a stone facade built by the Crusaders in 1100 AD, and is carved out of Mount Starius. The oldest surviving parts of the cave church date from the 4th or 5th century but were probably in use in the 1st century. There are floor mosaics and frescoes to the right side of the altar. Every year thousands of people go to see this place, one of the oldest churches in the world. 69 The Pillar of St. Paul in ancient Paphos, Cyprus. Paphos Archaeological Park, Paphos, Cyprus. The prophet Isaiah foretold the time when foreign countries would see God's glory. He wrote verse Arise, shine, for your light has come. And the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people, but the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Isaiah 60 verses 1-3. The Apostle Paul and Barnabas fulfilled this prophecy and came to the island of Cyprus. They went to the city of Paphos where they encountered the Roman proconsul Sergius Paulus and his attendant Elymas the sorcerer. According to tradition, Sergius Paulus commanded Paul to be tied to the column and beaten for preaching the message of Jesus. This pillar still stands today as seen here. In the 4th century a church was built around the pillar called the Panagia Chrysopolitissa Basilica, marking the place where St. Paul preached and Sergius Paulus was converted. This makes Cyprus the very first country to be governed by a Christian. The light had truly come to Cyprus. 70 The Sergius Paulus inscription discovered in ruins of Soli, Cyprus. Now in the Metropolitan Museum of New York. On Paul's first missionary journey with Barnabas, a native of Cyprus, they came to the ancient port city of Salamis, then went to the town of Paphos. Paphos was the capital of Cyprus, and from there the proconsul Sergius Paulus governed Cyprus around 44 AD, the time of Paul's visit. The proconsul was a provincial governor who was appointed to serve for a year by the Roman Senate. Evidence for Sergius Paulus was found in 1877 by General Luigi di Cisnola, who was an Italian-born colonel during the U.S. Civil War. As he excavated, he found an inscription in blue-gray marble found in the city of Soli, not far from Paphos, dated to 54 AD, with the name Proconsul Paulus. This inscription is catalogued as accession number 74.51.2425 at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, of which Cisnola became the first director. 71 Synagogue grounds in Pisidian Antioch where Paul preached. Ruins of Church of St. Paul, 1 kilometer northeast of Yulvak, Ipala, Turkey. Paul and Barnabas both came to Pisidian Antioch on Paul's first missionary journey, where they came and preached in the synagogue in approximately 46 AD. In 1833, British antiquarian and chaplain Francis Arundel surveyed Pisidian Antioch and was the first person to define and study the city. He discovered the Church of St. Paul, located in the western part of the city near the ramparts, and was built in 325 AD on the site of the 1st century synagogue where St. Paul first preached to the Gentiles in 46 AD. It is one of the largest churches ever discovered in Asia Minor, complete with an apse, a nave, 2 side aisles separated from the nave by 13 columns on each side, and a mosaic floor which is still visible today. 72 Ancient Lystra where Paul was stoned, Gokit, Konya, Turkey. In 1907, Scottish archaeologist Sir William Mitchell Ramsay discovered the ancient town of Lystra, the hometown of Saint Timothy. At the beginning of his career he was highly skeptical of the accounts in the Book of Acts. He therefore set out to put the writer of Acts on trial. He devoted his life to unearthing the ancient cities and documents of Asia Minor. After a lifetime of study, however, he concluded further study, showed that the Book of Acts could bear the most minute scrutiny as an authority for the facts of the Aegean world, and that it was written with such judgment, skill, art and perception of truth as to be a model of historical statement. You may press the words of Luke in a degree beyond any other historians and they stand the keenest scrutiny and the hardest treatment. 73. The place of Lydia's baptism near Philippi on river Kygaktai, Kavala, Greece. The prophet Malachi foretold, for from the rising of the sun, even to its going down, my name shall be great among the Gentiles, in every place incense shall be offered to my name, and a pure offering, for my name shall be great among the nations, says the Lord of hosts. Malachi 1 verses 11 to 12. The name of the Lord Jesus was becoming known throughout the Roman world and beyond in fulfillment of Malachi's prophecy. In 49 to 50 AD, Paul went on his second missionary journey with Silas and came to Macedonia. As there was no synagogue in Philippi, they went to a place of prayer out of the city by the Krenitz River. As they were meeting, Paul and Silas met with Lydia, a seller of purple cloth, shared the gospel. She received Jesus Christ and was baptized. The location of Lydia's baptism is the Krenitz River, outside the Philippi city limits. At this place is St. Lydia's Baptistry, a Greek Orthodox church, built in the early 1900s, commemorates the spot on the river where the first European convert, a woman, was baptized. 74. The prison at Philippi where Paul and Silas held ancient Philippi, Philippos, Greece. The prophet David, king of Israel, wrote verse, therefore I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the Gentiles, and sing praises to your name. Psalm 18 verse 49. This was fulfilled when Paul and Silas sang praise to God in the Philippi prison that day. The ancient city of Philippi was excavated and researched from 1914 to 1938 by the French School of Archaeology at Athens. Among their discoveries was the marketplace of Philippi. This is where Paul and Silas were brought before the magistrates of Philippi. Then they were put in prison nearby. Archaeologists are unsure, but this place may have been the site during the 1st century where Paul and Silas were placed in an inner prison and where an earthquake set them free. 75. The ancient city of Thessalonica, Thessaloniki, Greece. Today much of present-day Thessaloniki covers the ancient ruins of Thessalonica. However, recently Roman remains were unearthed, as seen below. Interestingly, the rulers of the city, or politiches, was a term inscribed on the city's gates. The Jewish community was quite vibrant for nearly 2 millennia. In Paul's day, he visited the synagogue which has not yet been discovered. Tragically, nearly 60,000 of the Jews living in Thessaloniki were deported and nearly all died in Nazi-built concentration camps. Today the Jewish population is only 1,200. 76. The city of Berea, Veria, Greece. According to tradition, the Apostle Paul came to Berea and preached to the Bereans at this place where the present monument stands. 77. The Areopagus, Mars Hill, in Athens, Greece. In ancient times, the Areopagus was a place in Athens where those accused of murder would stand trial. It was the place where the council or court of justice met in the open air on the hill. Later on the Romans renamed it Mars Hill after Mars, the Roman god of war. It was here that Paul preached his sermon to the Athenians and proclaimed to them about the unknown God, that this God was the creator of all things, and preached the gospel to them. 78. The Gallio inscription found in Temple of Apollo, Delphi, Greece. In 1903, a collection of 9 fragments of writing were discovered in Delphi, Greece, in the Temple of Apollo, by Émile Berget, French archaeologist, and a team of French archaeologists from the École Française d'Athens. They were written by the Emperor Claudius, and in the inscription, it says verse my friend Gallio, proconsul. This find fully confirms the biblical account in Acts 18 verses 12 to 17. 79 The judgment seat, Bema, in Corinth Archaea Corinthos, Greece. In 1929, American archaeologist Dr. T. L. Scheer conducted excavations and discovered the main judgment seat of Corinth right next to the Agora. The Apostle Paul stood right before the judgment seat, but before he could give his defense, Gallio the proconsul of Acre refused to hear the matter and the case was dismissed. Then a synagogue inscription was found that gives evidence of a synagogue from the 5th century. 80 The Erastus inscription in Corinth Archaea Corinthos, Greece. In 1929, American archaeologist Dr. T. L. Scheer directed excavations in ancient Corinth and discovered an inscription which clearly gives the name Erastus. It reads verse Erastus in return for his aedileship, laid the pavement at his own expense. An aedile means that he was responsible for public buildings and festivals and for enforcing public order. This is evidence that Erastus was a city official in Corinth, and Dr. Scheer believed that it was almost certainly the Erastus mentioned by Paul in the book of Romans. 81 The Great Theatre of Ephesus and Silver Shrines of Diana Selçuk, Izmir, Turkey. Paul's travel companions Gaius and Aristarchus were taken into the great theatre in Ephesus, which could seat 25,000 people. It was the largest in the province of Anatolia. The theatre was used for concerts and plays, religious and philosophical discussions, and for gladiator and animal fights. The city of Ephesus had an estimated 250,000 people. Today only about 10% of the city has yet been excavated. As well, coins have been found which depict the silver shrines that were made by the silversmiths in the city of Ephesus during the time of the Apostle Paul. This theatre itself and the coins which depict the silver shrines of Diana give evidence of the events which took place in Acts 19 verses 23 to 29. 82 Herod's Palace in Caesarea Maritima, where Paul was imprisoned, Caesarea, Israel. In 1976, Dr. Ehud Netzer, professor at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, directed systematic excavations of the Promontory Palace grounds, uncovering the ruins of a magnificent structure. In the center of the palace was a large rock-cut pool which measured 35 by 18 m. The historian Josephus describes an exquisite palace complex for Herod, which was since destroyed. Excavations proceeded to 1994 and continued to reveal many structures of Herod's palace. In 58 AD, the Apostle Paul, accused of having caused a riot, was sent to Caesarea to be tried by the governor. Being a Roman citizen, Paul demanded to be heard at the emperor's court. He said, verse I appeal to Caesar. He then sailed to Rome from Caesarea's harbor. There he was tried and a few years later executed. This hall, below, may very well have been the place where the Apostle Paul appealed to Caesar, and he may have been imprisoned for nearly 2 years in the Promontory Palace grounds. 83 The possible anchor of St. Paul's grain ship found in Salinas Bay, Malta. Displayed in Malta Maritime Museum, Vittoriosa, Malta. On the 25th of April, 2005, while diving off the northern coast of Malta, Paul Gatt, a Maltese volunteer firefighter and florist, discovered a large metal anchor. This anchor was 2.3 m in length and weighed 700 kg. It was found at a depth of 36 m of water in Salina Bay, Malta. The inscription on the anchor were the deities Isis and Serapis. This indicates that this ship was constructed in Egypt, where Isis was one of the chief deities and Serapis was a Greco-Egyptian god. In Acts 27, Luke tells us that the ship was Alexandrian, so this is evidence that this could have belonged to this extremely important ship carrying 276 passengers that ran aground in the same area of Malta. The anchor is now on display at the Malta Maritime Museum in Vittoriosa, Malta. 84. The Mamertine prison in Rome, where Peter and Paul awaited execution. Ancient Rome, Italy. The Mamertine prison was a place where criminals accused of serious crimes would spend short stays prior to their execution. Many died within the cell, which was initially a water cistern, converted to a jail cell perhaps in the 7th century BC, when it was the only prison, and used until the 4th century AD. The ancient historian Sallust said that it was 4 meters below the ground, and neglect, darkness and stench made it hideous and fearsome to behold. According to tradition, both the apostles Peter and Paul both spent time in the Mamertine prison in Rome prior to their execution. Church legend records that Peter was kept here and his fellow prisoners were converted to Christ. Then miraculously a spring began to flow on the cell floor, and he then baptized the new converts inside the cell. Then he was crucified upside down around 62 AD under the Emperor Nero, believing that he was not worthy to die in the same way as Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul was taken to Rome following the shipwreck, stood trial before the emperor, but was under house arrest. He was later released, then arrested again and brought to prison in Rome. It was probably here where he wrote the second epistle to Timothy, knowing that the time of his death was imminent. Paul was beheaded later on order of Emperor Nero around 65 to 67 AD. 85. The home of Mary in Ephesus, Ormanyolu Park, Turkey. Tradition holds that the Apostle John took care of Mary as he fled from Palestine following intense persecution under King Agrippa I. John fled to Ephesus with Mary, became a pastor, served there and took care of Mary in his own home. In 1881, Father Julien Gouet, a French Roman Catholic priest, discovered a small stone building dating to the Byzantine period, and further excavations revealed a 1st century dwelling with a small bedroom on the side believed to be Mary's bedroom. It is located on a mountain near the ancient ruins of Ephesus overlooking the Aegean Sea. It was realized that this small stone building without a roof had been venerated by the early church and was frequented by people nearby who were descendants of the original faithful Ephesian Christians whose ancestors the Apostle John served as leader. Today pilgrims who come to this home can visit the chapel and write prayers and wishes and attach them to a wishing wall on the grounds of Mary's home. As well, a spring of water flows underneath the home and pilgrims come and drink its waters. It is believed that these waters have curative properties. 86. The Tomb of Mary in Jerusalem, Kidron Valley, Jerusalem, Israel. According to tradition, Mary, the mother of Jesus, traveled to Ephesus along with the Apostle John, who was commissioned with caring for her by Jesus himself. She lived in Ephesus for some time before returning to Jerusalem and dying in and around the year 41 AD. Her body was then taken to the tomb of the Virgin Mary in Jerusalem. Catholic and Orthodox believers believe that she was resurrected on the 3rd day and later ascended to heaven, so her tomb was empty. This tomb is found at the foot of the Mount of Olives near the Garden of Gethsemane. In 1972, Dr. Bellarmino Bagatti, a Franciscan friar and archaeologist, excavated the site and found a 1st century cemetery. A small place of worship and edicule was built over the original site of the tomb of Mary. Then a larger octagonal church was built over this in the 5th century but was destroyed by the Persian invasion of 614 AD. The site was rebuilt and destroyed several times, and in the year 1130 the tomb was rebuilt by the Crusaders but then later destroyed by Saladin. Finally in the year 1757, Greek Orthodox clergy expelled the Franciscans. Now the site has been continued to be cared for by the Armenian Orthodox and the Greek Orthodox Church of Jerusalem. 87. The place of the death of the Apostle James, son of Zebedee, Cathedral of St. James, Jerusalem, Israel. James, son of Zebedee, was a fisherman by trade working in Capernaum when Jesus called him to a lifetime of ministry. He and his brother John were nicknamed Boanerges or Sons of Thunder. He was a strong leader of the church, and by order of Herod Agrippa I, in 44 AD, James was beheaded in Jerusalem. The Roman officer who guarded James watched amazed as James defended his faith at his trial. Later, this officer walked beside James to the place of execution. Overcome by conviction, he declared his new Christian faith to the judge and knelt beside James to accept beheading as a Christian. This took place in the location that is now St. James Church in Jerusalem. 88 The place of the burial of the Apostle James son of Zebedee in Spain. Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Some traditions hold that James had gone previously to preach the gospel in Iberia, modern Spain, so his decapitated body was transferred by believers from Jerusalem to the tomb within what is now in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. In Spanish, James is Santiago, and he is the patron saint of Spain. Many Christians from around the world make an 800 kilometers pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago from a small town in France to just beyond Santiago de Compostela, remembering the life of that faithful apostle James, or Santiago. 89 The place of the martyrdom of the apostle Matthew. Ancient Napata, Jebel Barkal, Sudan. Saint Matthew, or Levi, son of Alphaeus, was a tax collector by profession and sat and received taxes from his place of occupation in Capernaum. As a tax collector he was literate in both Aramaic and Greek. He invited Jesus to his home for a feast with other tax collectors and sinners. According to Irenaeus and Clement of Alexandria, Matthew preached the gospel of Jesus Christ to the Jews living in Judea following the ascension of Jesus Christ before going to other countries. It was Matthew who was credited to writing the first gospel according to Papias of Hierapolis, 100 to 140 AD. Ethiopian church tradition states that Matthew along with Bartholomew came to Ethiopia for a mission that lasted 3 months. Tradition holds that King Hyrtacus had Matthew killed because he wished to marry a convent abbess named Iphigenia, and the apostle Matthew forbade it as she was dedicated to Christ. It was in Ethiopia or Kush that the apostle Matthew was martyred for his faith by being killed with the halberd in the city of Nadabah, as recounted in Fox's Book of Martyrs, in 60 AD. It would make sense that it was in Napata because this was the capital of the Kush kingdom and it was here that the king of Kush reigned. In 1916, American archaeologist and Harvard professor of Egyptology Georgia Reisner made excavations of the city of Napata, capital of the Kush kingdom, and uncovered the royal palace from which the king who killed Matthew reigned. 90 The burial place of the apostle Matthew. Crypt of Salerno Cathedral, Salerno, Italy. Matthew was killed by halberd in Napata, the capital of the Kish kingdom. Then his remains were transported in 1084 AD and interred in a crypt in the Salerno Cathedral in Italy. The Salerno Cathedral is richly decorated in gold with many depictions of the life of Jesus Christ as told in the Gospel of Matthew and is a major tourist attraction.